Jack Murphy wiped the sweat from his brow as he finished fixing the old tractor. The sun was setting on New Haven, casting long shadows across the small settlement. He checked his watch and smiled. Still time to make it home before Lily finished her homework. The walk home took Jack past friendly faces who waved and called out greetings. 8 years on this quiet farming colony had made him a familiar fixture. Nobody here knew him as anything but the reliable mechanic who could fix almost anything and raised his daughter alone. Jack opened the door to their small house at the edge of town. "Lily, I'm home." A blur of movement rushed toward him, and his 10-year-old daughter jumped into his arms. Her blonde hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her face was bright with excitement. "Dad, I got an A on my science project." She waved a tablet showing her grade. "That's my girl," Jack said, hugging her tight. "How about we celebrate with your favorite dinner?" While Lily chatted about her day at school, Jack prepared a simple meal. These quiet moments were precious to him. They had built this life together, just the two of them, far from his past. Later that night, after tucking Lily into bed, Jack sat on the porch and looked up at the stars. 8 years ago, those same stars had known him by a different name. The Phantom, the deadliest special operative humanity had ever produced. The man who had brought down governments and changed the course of conflicts with nothing but his skills and determination. But that man was gone now. Jack had made sure of it when he disappeared after Lily's mother died. He had chosen this remote world specifically because it was far from the central systems and their politics, far from anyone who might recognize him. Jack was about to head inside when he noticed something unusual in the night sky, a flash of light that didn't belong among the familiar constellations. He narrowed his eyes, focusing on the spot. There it was again, and again. Ships, multiple ships, their engines flaring as they changed course. Their movement pattern was too precise for ordinary merchant vessels. Jack felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. He recognized those movement patterns: scout ships, moving in a standard search formation. Military ships. The colony's communication system crackled to life, an unusual occurrence at this hour. Jack stepped inside and activated the small receiver on his kitchen counter. "Attention, citizens," Mayor Peter's voice sounded strained. "We've received inquiries about unusual light patterns in our night sky. I want to assure everyone that Colonial Administration has confirmed these are simply trading vessels on their way to the Centauri system. There is no cause for concern. Please continue with your regular activities." Jack turned off the receiver, his jaw tight. The mayor was wrong. Those weren't trading vessels. He'd seen enough military scout ships in his previous life to recognize them instantly. What he didn't know was who they belonged to or what they wanted. He stepped back outside and looked up again. The ships had disappeared, likely hiding their positions now. Jack's instincts, dormant for years, were suddenly screaming danger. In his bedroom, he unlocked a hidden compartment beneath the floorboards. Inside was a small metal box he hadn't opened since arriving on New Haven. His fingers hesitated over the lock. Opening this box meant acknowledging that his peaceful life might be in jeopardy. But if there was even a small chance that Lily could be in danger, he needed to be prepared. Jack opened the box and stared at the contents. A compact military-grade communicator. A small but lethal knife made of materials that wouldn't register on standard scans. And a simple silver chain with a single dog tag, not his own, but a reminder of why he had left that life behind. He closed the box without removing anything. Not yet. Perhaps the mayor was right, and he was overreacting. Perhaps his old life wasn't catching up to him. But as Jack Murphy went to bed that night, he found himself listening for unusual sounds, the habits of the Phantom returning unbidden. And as he drifted off to sleep, he couldn't shake the feeling that their peaceful life was about to change forever. Jack woke to the sound of sirens. He jumped out of bed, instantly alert, and rushed to Lily's room. She was sitting up, eyes wide with fear. "Dad, what's happening?" she asked as he grabbed her hand. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we need to get to the shelter," Jack said, helping her into her shoes. The ground shook beneath them. Through Lily's window, Jack saw bright flashes in the sky. His worst fears were confirmed. This was an attack. "Get your emergency bag," Jack said. They had practiced this drill before, but Lily had always thought it was just a game. As they stepped outside, chaos filled the streets. People ran in all directions. In the sky, massive ships broke through the atmosphere. Jack recognized their design immediately. Cronus Empire warships, the most aggressive expanding force in the galaxy. "Colony of New Haven," a booming voice announced from the ships. "You are in violation of Cronus Empire Territorial Decree 15. Surrender immediately." More explosions rocked the settlement. Buildings collapsed as orbital strikes targeted the small defense station and government buildings. "Dad, I'm scared," Lily whispered, clutching his hand. "Stay close to me," Jack said, leading her toward the colony's main bunker. His mind raced through options. The colony had no meaningful defenses against a Cronus fleet. Their only hope was to find shelter and wait for possible help from the Alliance. They were halfway to the bunker when a blast hit the building next to them. Jack shielded Lily with his body as debris rained down. When he looked up, the road ahead was blocked by rubble. "We need to go around," he said, changing direction. They joined a group of colonists heading toward the eastern shelter. Suddenly, 3 Cronus transport ships descended into the town square. Soldiers in black armor poured out, firing weapons that released nets rather than energy blasts. "They're taking prisoners," Jack realized with growing dread. He pulled Lily into an alley. "We need to hide." But hiding spots were disappearing as more buildings crumbled under the attack. Jack decided their best chance was to reach the woods beyond the settlement. From there, they could make it to the emergency communication station and call for help. They were almost at the edge of town when a blast separated them. Jack was thrown one way, Lily another. His head hit the ground hard. "Lily," he shouted, struggling to his feet. Through the smoke, he saw her small form lying motionless. As he ran toward her, a Cronus soldier reached her first. "No," Jack yelled, charging forward. 2 more soldiers appeared, blocking his path. Jack's training took over. He moved with deadly precision, taking down the first soldier with a strike to the throat. The second went down just as quickly. But there were too many. As he fought through them, he saw more soldiers lifting Lily and other unconscious children onto stretchers. "Dad." Lily's voice cut through the noise as she regained consciousness. She reached for him, fear in her eyes. "I'm coming," Jack shouted, fighting with everything he had. But a stun blast hit him from behind. He fell to his knees, muscles spasming, but kept his eyes on Lily as they carried her toward the transport ship. With sheer willpower, Jack rose again, staggering forward. Another blast hit him, and another. Still, he kept moving, each step agony. The transport ramp was closing. Through blurred vision, Jack saw Lily's frightened face among the other children inside. "I will find you," he promised, though she couldn't hear him now. "I will come for you." The ship sealed shut and lifted off. Jack collapsed to the ground as a final orbital strike targeted his position. The world around him exploded in light and heat. From orbit, the Cronus commander marked the settlement as neutralized. All valuable assets secured. Proceed with final cleansing protocol. The warships unleashed a devastating barrage, reducing what remained of the colony to ash. As they departed, they logged the operation as complete. No survivors expected. They were wrong. Beneath the rubble of what had once been his home, Jack Murphy clung to life. And to a single thought, they had taken his daughter, and they would pay. Pain brought Jack back to consciousness. His body felt broken, crushed beneath rubble and twisted metal. The air was thick with dust and smoke. For a moment, he couldn't remember what had happened. Then it hit him like a physical blow. Lily. They had taken Lily. Jack pushed against the weight pinning him down. His muscles screamed in protest, But he didn't stop. Inch by inch, he freed himself from the debris of what had once been his home. The colony was unrecognizable. Where buildings had stood, only smoking ruins remained. Bodies lay in the streets. Jack staggered forward, blood running down his face, one arm hanging useless at his side. He had to find help, had to find a way to go after Lily. "Hey, over here," a voice called out. "I found someone alive." Jack turned to see a man climbing over a pile of rubble. He recognized him vaguely. Alan Grant, who worked at the colony's communications center. "Jack Murphy?" Alan asked, reaching his side. "My God, I thought everyone in this sector was dead." "My daughter," Jack rasped, his throat raw from smoke. "They took her. The Cronus ships." Alan helped Jack to a more sheltered area where he had set up a small camp. "I'm sorry. They took all the children they could find. Some adults too, but mostly kids." Jack sat heavily on a crate, letting Alan clean his wounds. "Why? Why would they want children?" "I don't know," Alan said. "But I managed to track the transport ship's jump signature before our systems went down. I know where they went." Jack looked up sharply. "Where?" "Cronus Command Station, in the Vega sector." Alan hesitated. "But Jack, that's the heart of their empire. It's impossible to get in there. We need to wait for Alliance forces to respond to our distress signal." "How long will that take?" Alan looked away. "Weeks, maybe months, if they come at all. New Haven isn't exactly high on their priority list." Jack stood up, ignoring the pain. "I can't wait that long." "What can you do? You're just a mechanic. And you're injured. We need military help." Jack stared at Alan for a long moment. Then he asked, "What did you do before you came to New Haven, Alan?" "I was a communications officer in the Alliance fleet," Alan replied, surprised by the question. "And what do you know about me?" Alan shifted uncomfortably. "Just rumors. When I processed your colony application years ago, your name flagged in the system. I saw parts of your file before it was restricted." "What parts?" "Enough to know you weren't always Jack Murphy, the mechanic." Alan swallowed hard. "You were something else. Someone called the Phantom." Jack was silent for a long moment. He hadn't heard that name spoken aloud in 8 years. "That man is dead." "No," Alan said quietly. "I think the Cronus Empire just brought him back to life." Jack walked to the edge of their makeshift shelter and looked at the destroyed colony. "If I'm going to find Lily, I need equipment. Communications, weapons." "I salvaged some gear from the comm center," Alan said, "including a long-range transmitter. But who would you contact? The Phantom doesn't exist in any official records." Jack turned back to him. "There's someone who can help. Someone who always knew how to find me." That night, Jack sat before the transmitter while Alan slept nearby. His fingers hesitated over the controls. To send this message was to fully step back into his old life. But Lily's frightened face filled his mind, pushing away all doubt. He entered a series of codes, ones he had memorized and never thought he would use again. Then he recorded a simple message. "Susan, they took my daughter. I need the Phantom protocol. Coordinates to follow." Jack sent the transmission, encoded on a frequency only one person would be monitoring. Then he waited. The response came 3 hours later. Just 2 words. "Coming. Prepare." Jack looked at the message and felt something shift inside him. The peaceful mechanic receded, and in his place, something colder and more deadly emerged. The Cronus Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked a single father, never knowing they had awakened the legendary Boogeyman. "They want the Phantom," Jack whispered to himself. "Now they'll get him." The Nexus space station hung against the backdrop of stars like a giant metal wheel. Jack and Alan approached in a small transport ship they had salvaged from the colony's ruins. Jack's injuries had been treated with basic medical supplies, but pain still shot through his body with every movement. "Remember," Jack said as they neared the docking bay, We're traders who escaped a pirate attack. Nothing more. Alan nodded nervously. How will we find your contact? She'll find us, Jack replied. Inside the station, they made their way through crowded corridors. Nexus was neutral territory, a place where people from all corners of the galaxy came to trade goods and information. It was also a place where no questions were asked about anyone's past. Jack led them to a small bar called the Lost Asteroid. The moment they entered, he felt eyes on them. He scanned the room casually, noting exits and potential threats, old habits returning with surprising ease. Sit at the corner table, Jack instructed Alan. Order drinks but don't talk to anyone. They had barely settled when a woman slid into the booth beside them. She was in her 50s, with short gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. You look terrible, Jack, she said. Good to see you too, Susan, he replied. Susan Wright had been his handler during his years as the Phantom. She had coordinated his missions, provided his intelligence, and sometimes, when things went very wrong, pulled him out of impossible situations. I brought friends, Susan said, nodding toward 3 people at the bar. They're eager to see you again. Jack recognized them immediately. Carlos Rodriguez, a weapons specialist with dark hair and a scar across one cheek. Diane Powell, tactical expert and infiltration specialist. And Frank Wells, the best pilot Jack had ever known. How did you find them so quickly? Jack asked. I never lost track of them, Susan replied. Or you? Jack felt a flash of anger. You were watching me. All these years. Just making sure you were safe, Susan said. I owed you that much after everything you did. Jack pushed aside his feelings. Tell me about the Cronus Empire. Why are they taking children? Susan's expression darkened. We've tracked at least 6 raids on outer colonies in the past month, all targeting children between ages 8 and 12. We believe they're conducting experiments. What kind of experiments? Alan asked, his face pale. Based on intelligence we've gathered, they're testing for psychic abilities, Susan explained. Human children from certain colonies have shown potential that the Cronus are trying to weaponize. Jack's hands clenched. And Lily. If she's your daughter, she likely has genetic markers they're interested in, Susan said gently. Your enhanced abilities might be hereditary. The thought of Lily being used as a test subject made Jack's blood run cold. I need to get her back. Now. That's why we're here, Susan said. But Jack, the Cronus Command Station is one of the most heavily guarded facilities in the galaxy, even for the Phantom. This is a suicide mission. I don't care, Jack said. I'm going after her. We know, Susan nodded. That's why we came prepared. She slid a small data chip across the table. This contains all the intelligence we have on the command station, security protocols, patrol schedules, and a potential way in through their waste disposal system. Frank joined them at the table. I've got a stealth ship docked on level 3. Military grade, with enough weapons to start a small war. Carlos has been collecting toys for you, Susan added. I think you'll approve of his selection. Jack felt something he hadn't expected, a sense of belonging. These people had been more than teammates. They had been his family before Lily. Why are you all doing this? He asked. This isn't your fight. Diane stepped forward. We all lost something to the Cronus. This is personal for all of us. Carlos nodded. Besides, when the Phantom calls, you answer. That's the rule. Jack looked at each of them, then at Alan, who seemed overwhelmed but determined. We leave in 6 hours, Jack decided. I need to be ready. Susan watched as Jack walked away with Carlos to inspect the weapons. He's different, she said quietly to Diane. Of course he is, Diane replied. Before, he was the Phantom who had nothing to lose. Now he's a father who has everything to lose. And that, Susan said, is what makes him more dangerous than ever. The Cronus outpost floated in the emptiness of space, a small station orbiting a dead moon. Unlike the heavily fortified command station, this outpost was lightly guarded, a perfect target for Jack's first strike. Approaching silent mode. Frank said from the pilot's seat of their stealth ship. Sensors show minimal crew, mostly automated systems. Jack checked his weapons. Carlos had provided him with specialized gear, a combat suit that absorbed energy blasts, and weapons that left no trace of their origin. Jack had forgotten how it felt to wear such equipment. His body remembered, though. The weight felt familiar, almost comforting. "Remember the plan," Diane said. "We get in, access their network, find information about the children, and get out. No unnecessary engagement." Jack nodded, but inside, he felt a cold fury building. Every moment Lily remained in Cronus' hands was another moment she might be suffering. "Docking complete," Frank announced. "Good luck." Jack, Diane, and Carlos moved through the airlock and into the station. The corridors were dimly lit and quiet. Using the station schematics Susan had provided, they navigated toward the central control room. They encountered their first guard at a junction. Before the man could react, Jack moved with blinding speed. One precise strike, and the guard crumpled to the floor, unconscious. "You haven't lost your touch," Carlos whispered. They reached the control room without further incident. While Carlos stood guard, Diane worked on bypassing the security protocols of the main computer. "I'm in," she said after a few minutes. "Accessing the secure Cronus network now." Jack watched as information scrolled across the screen. "Search for data on human children from New Haven Colony." Diane typed rapidly. "Found something. Project Starchild. It's... oh God." On the screen appeared images that made Jack's blood run cold. Children in medical chambers, connected to machines that monitored their brain activity. Notes described experiments to enhance latent psychic abilities through genetic modification. "Is Lily there?" Jack asked, his voice tight. Diane scrolled through the files. "Yes, she's listed as a prime subject due to her genetic profile." She pointed to a note. "Subject L7, daughter of former enhanced operative, shows highest potential of all subjects." Jack's hands clenched into fists. They knew. They knew who I was when they attacked New Haven. "Jack," Carlos called from the doorway. "We've got company. Security patrol, headed this way." "How many?" Jack asked. 5, maybe 6. Jack looked at Diane. "Do you have what we need?" She nodded, downloading the data to a portable drive. "Got it. Including the security codes for the main research facility." "Good." Jack moved toward the door. "You two head back to the ship. I'll deal with the patrol." Carlos grabbed his arm. "That's not the plan. We avoid engagement, remember." "Plans change," Jack said, his voice cold. "Go." Reluctantly, Carlos and Diane headed for the extraction point while Jack moved in the opposite direction, toward the approaching patrol. The Cronus security team never stood a chance. Jack moved like a shadow, striking with deadly precision. One by one, they fell. He didn't kill them. He didn't need to. The Phantom had never been about unnecessary death. He was about sending a message. When the last guard hit the floor, Jack activated his comm. "Path is clear. Meet you at the ship." Back aboard, Frank piloted them away from the outpost before the alarm could spread. Susan was waiting for their transmission. "Did you get what we needed?" she asked over the secure channel. "More than that," Diane replied, her voice shaking slightly. "We know why they took the children. And it's worse than we thought." As Diane explained, Jack sat apart from the others, looking at a small photo of Lily he kept in his pocket. His hands were trembling, not from fear, but from rage. Ellen approached cautiously. "Jack, are you okay?" "They targeted New Haven because of me," Jack said quietly. "They wanted Lily because she's my daughter. You couldn't have known." Jack looked up, his eyes hard. "No, but they'll soon wish they hadn't known either." In the command center of the Cronus outpost, a security officer reviewed footage of the attack. His eyes widened as he watched Jack take down the entire patrol with movements too fast to track. "Sir," he called to his superior, You need to see this." The commander watched the footage, his face paling. "That fighting style, it can't be." "Sir." "Alert command station immediately," the commander ordered. "Tell them the Phantom has returned, and he's coming for them." Over the next 2 weeks, Jack's team struck 4 more Cronus facilities. Each attack followed the same pattern: quick, precise, and devastating. They left no casualties, but the damage to Cronus operations was severe. On the bridge of the stealth ship, Susan studied their next target, the supply depot at Rigel Station. It's heavily guarded, but according to our intelligence, it supplies the main research facility where they're keeping the children. Jack nodded. He had changed in these 2 weeks. His face was harder, his eyes colder. The peaceful mechanic was gone, replaced by the Phantom, the legend that had once brought entire military forces to their knees. "If we disrupt their supply lines," Diane said, "we force them to move the children. That's when they'll be vulnerable. Or they might hurt them." Alan argued. He had proven surprisingly useful, his communication skills helping them stay ahead of Cronus security measures. "They won't," Jack said. Everyone turned to look at him. "They need the children healthy for their experiments. They won't risk damaging their subjects." The word tasted bitter in his mouth. Children. Subjects. His daughter. The thought of Lily scared and alone kept him focused, kept the rage burning cold and clear. Frank set course for Rigel Station, while Carlos prepared the weapons. The plan was simple: disable the station's defenses, plant explosives on the supply ships, and escape before anyone knew they were there. But as they approached Rigel, Frank frowned at his sensors. "Something's wrong. Security is much tighter than our intel suggested." Jack looked over his shoulder. "They're expecting us." "We should abort," Susan advised. "Find another way." Jack was silent for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No, we proceed as planned." The mission started smoothly. Jack, Carlos, and Diane infiltrated the station, while Frank kept the ship ready for quick extraction. But as they reached the main hangar where the supply ships were docked, they walked into a trap. Intruders detected in Sector 7 blared the station's comm system. Blast doors slammed shut around them. "They knew we were coming," Carlos said, checking his weapon. Jack's mind raced. "Susan, we need another exit." Over the comm, Susan responded instantly. "Maintenance shaft, north wall. It should lead to an external airlock." As they moved, Cronus troops poured into the hangar. Jack engaged them without hesitation, his movements a blur. Carlos and Diane fought alongside him, but they were quickly overwhelmed by sheer numbers. "Go," Jack ordered, taking down 3 soldiers with precise strikes. "Get to the ship." Carlos hesitated. "We're not leaving you." "That's an order," Jack said, his voice leaving no room for argument. "I'll be right behind you." As Carlos and Diane retreated toward the maintenance shaft, Jack faced the remaining soldiers alone. He fought with cold efficiency, each movement calculated and deadly. When the last soldier fell, Jack sprinted after his team. They made it back to the ship, but not without cost. Carlos had taken a blast to his shoulder, and Jack was limping from a wound to his leg. "What happened?" Susan demanded as Frank piloted them away from the station, evading Cronus fighters. "They knew we were coming," Jack said, allowing Diane to treat his injury. "Someone is feeding them information." The accusation hung in the air. They had been careful. Their plans had been known only to those on the ship. "The question," Susan said, "is how much do they know about us? About our ultimate target?" The answer came sooner than expected. As they reached safe distance, a message broke through on all communication channels. The face of Lord Vex, Supreme Commander of the Cronus Empire, appeared on their screens. To the one called the Phantom, Lord Vex spoke directly to the camera. "Your attacks on Cronus property have been noted. Your skills remain impressive, even after years of retirement." Jack stared at the screen, his expression unreadable. "But know this," Lord Vex continued. We have what you want. The child. Your child. And if you continue your futile campaign against us, she will suffer for your actions. The message ended with coordinates. A direct challenge. Lord Vex was inviting Jack to come to him. It's a trap, Susan said quietly. Jack nodded. Yes, it is. He stood up, his decision made. And we're going to spring it. The main research facility of the Cronus Empire loomed before them, a massive structure orbiting a red giant star. From their hiding place behind a small moon, Jack and his team studied the facility's defenses. 3 patrol ships, Frank noted, automated defense platforms at each docking bay, and probably hundreds of soldiers inside. Susan pulled up the schematics they had obtained from their previous raids. Based on these plans, the children are being kept in the central laboratory, heavily guarded and separated from the rest of the facility. Jack studied the layout, his mind calculating angles, timing, and risks. We'll need a distraction. I have an idea, Alan said. Everyone turned to look at him, surprised. He had been quiet since they received Lord Vex's message. The facility has an emergency protocol for stellar flares. If we can trigger their sensors to detect a false flare, they'll initiate lockdown procedures, during which all personnel will move to designated safe zones. Diane finished, nodding. That could work. Carlos, his shoulder still bandaged from their last mission, checked the weapons. Even with a distraction, we're going up against impossible odds. Jack looked at each member of his team. They had risked everything to help him. I can't ask you to follow me into this. You're not asking, Frank said simply. We're volunteering. They spent the next 12 hours preparing. Susan and Alan worked on the false stellar flare program. Diane memorized the facility's layout, planning their entry and exit routes. Carlos prepared specialized explosives that would breach the laboratory walls without harming anyone inside. As they made their final preparations, Jack took a moment alone in his quarters. He looked at Lily's photo, touching it gently. I'm coming, sweetheart, he whispered. Hold on just a little longer. Susan found him there. It's time, she said softly. The plan began with precision. Alan's false stellar flare triggered exactly as predicted. Alarms blared throughout the facility as personnel moved to safety zones. Frank piloted their ship through the confusion, docking at a maintenance airlock that wasn't covered by the automated defenses. Guards are down by 60% in your path, Susan reported from the ship. You have approximately 15 minutes before they realize the flare is fake. Jack, Diane, and Carlos moved through the facility like shadows. Jack led the way, his senses heightened by years of training and the desperate need to find his daughter. They encountered small groups of guards but dispatched them quickly and silently. When they reached the central laboratory's outer doors, Carlos placed his explosives. Ready when you are. Jack nodded. Do it. The explosion was controlled, precise, just enough to break the locks without triggering additional alarms. The doors slid open, revealing a scene from a nightmare. 20 children lay in special chambers, connected to machines that hummed with energy. Scientists in white coats moved between the chambers, taking readings and making adjustments. Jack's eyes found Lily immediately. She was pale, too pale, but her chest rose and fell steadily. She was alive. Secure the scientists, Jack ordered, his voice tight with controlled rage. Don't let them touch any controls. Diane moved quickly, herding the terrified scientists into a corner while Carlos began shutting down the equipment. Jack went straight to Lily's chamber. His hand shook as he worked to disconnect her from the machines. As the last wire came free, her eyes fluttered open. Dad? She whispered, her voice weak. I'm here, sweetheart, Jack said, gathering her gently in his arms. I promised I'd find you. Lily clung to him, trembling. I knew you would come. One of the scientists broke away from the group, lunging toward a console. You can't take them. The experiment is at a critical stage. Diane intercepted him, but not before he hit an alarm button. Sirens wailed throughout the facility. We need to move, Carlos urged. Now. As Jack carried Lily toward the exit, the main doors slid open. A figure stood there, flanked by elite Cronus guards in black armor. He was tall, with pale skin and eyes like ice. Lord Vex. The Phantom. Lord Vex said, his voice surprisingly soft. At last, we meet. Jack placed Lily behind him, shielding her with his body. This ends now. Lord Vex smiled. Oh no, this is only beginning. Jack stood face to face with Lord Vex, the man responsible for attacking his home and taking his daughter. Behind him, Carlos and Diane moved protectively closer to the children. You've caused quite a bit of trouble, Lord Vex said, studying Jack with cold curiosity. All this destruction, just for one child. Not just any child, Jack replied. My child. Lord Vex smiled. Yes, the daughter of the Phantom. Did you think we attacked your colony by chance? We've been searching for you for years. Why? Jack demanded. Because you are unique, Lord Vex explained. Your abilities are beyond normal human limits, and we wanted to know if those abilities could be passed to the next generation. He looked at Lily. Your daughter has extraordinary potential. Jack's hands clenched into fists. She's not your experiment. You could have lived your life in peace, Lord Vex continued. A simple mechanic on a backwater colony. Did you really think you could escape what you are? He shook his head. You were always the Boogeyman, the monster in the shadows. Did you think you could escape that? Dad. Lily's voice was small and frightened behind him. It's okay, Lily, Jack assured her, never taking his eyes off Lord Vex. Everything will be okay. Lord Vex signaled to his guards. Take them all. Kill the adults if necessary, but don't harm the children. The guards moved forward. Jack glanced quickly at Carlos and Diane, who nodded almost imperceptibly. They had planned for this. Now, Jack shouted. Carlos threw a device to the floor. It exploded in a brilliant flash of light, temporarily blinding Lord Vex and his guards. In that moment, Jack moved with incredible speed. He took down 3 guards before they could even raise their weapons. Diane activated the emergency protocol they had programmed into the facility system. All around them, doors began to close as the station entered lockdown mode. Lord Vex recovered quickly, drawing a weapon of his own. Impressive, he said, but futile. He fired at Jack, who dodged with inhuman reflexes. The 2 men circled each other while chaos erupted around them. Guards fought with Carlos and Diane, who held their own with remarkable skill. You are everything, the legend said, Lord Vex commented, firing again and missing. Imagine what we could accomplish if you joined us. I'll never join you, Jack said, closing the distance between them. Their fight was brutal and swift. Lord Vex was a skilled fighter, but Jack was fueled by something more powerful than training, the need to protect his child. With a series of calculated strikes, Jack disarmed Lord Vex and forced him to his knees. Jack stood over him, holding Lord Vex's own weapon pointed at his head. The room fell silent. Do it, Lord Vex challenged. Show your daughter who you really are. Show her the Phantom. Jack's finger tensed on the trigger. Every instinct from his old life told him to eliminate the threat permanently. But then he felt a small hand slip into his free one. Dad, Lily said quietly, let's go home. Jack looked down at his daughter, then back at Lord Vex. The Phantom died years ago, he said, lowering the weapon. I'm just a father protecting his child. He turned away, lifting Lily into his arms. Carlos, Diane, get the children to the ship. They hurried through the facility, following the escape route they had planned. Susan's voice came through their comms. 30 seconds until extraction. Hurry. They reached the airlock just as Frank docked the ship. As they rushed aboard with the rescued children, Lord Vex's voice echoed through the station. This isn't over. But it was. Frank piloted them away as Carlos detonated the final explosives they had planted, disabling the facility's weapons and pursuit ships. In the days that followed, news spread throughout the galaxy that the Phantom had returned and struck a devastating blow against the Cronus Empire. Systems that had been suffering under Cronus oppression began to rebel, inspired by the legend of a single father who had taken on an empire to save his child. 6 months later, Jack and Lily settled on a peaceful planet far from their previous home. Jack returned to being a mechanic, but he no longer hid his past from his daughter. "Are you sad you're not the Phantom anymore?" Lily asked him one evening as they watched the sunset. Jack smiled, putting his arm around her shoulders. "No, being your dad was always the most important job I'll ever have." The Boogeyman had returned to the shadows, but this time he had brought his daughter into the light with him.